Welcome to Fandomology, where I study fandoms, tell you what's awesome and what to avoid. This week we're going to be talking about Aladdin, specifically Disney's Aladdin, because that's where the fandom lies. Before I get into the full breakdown of movies, TV shows, video games, and comic books, I want to talk about the nostalgia factor I have for Aladdin. Aladdin was one of my favorite animated Disney films growing up, and it definitely affects how I feel about all the related content that's been out since then.
You won't get away so easy!
You think that was easy?
Aladdin was based on the Arabic folktale Aladdin and His Magic Lamp, which was eventually transcribed and collected into a book called 1001 Arabian Nights, with other stories such as Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves. In 1992, Disney released their own version of the story as an animated feature film, starring Scott Weiner, Linda Larkin, and of course, Robin Williams. It was directed by Ron Clements and John Musker. Aladdin is one of those films that just works on every level, from the animation, to the voice acting, the comedic timing, the songs. It has very much earned its reputation. As great as this film is, it wouldn't have been the same without Robin Williams as the genie. He really brought in the fun and comedy that needed for that Disney charm. Aladdin was followed up by the dismal Return of Jafar, which saw a huge downgrade as it was direct-to-video. It was a downgrade from Robin Williams to Dan Castellaneta, animation, voice acting, and the songs. Whose idea was it to give Gilbert Gottfried a song? King of Thieves was the third installment of the animated feature films. It was quite an upgrade from The Return of Jafar, though that's not saying much. It had a better story, animation, and songs. It also featured the return of Robin Williams as the genie, making tons of Disney references. I think what happened here was, in the first film you had a lot of adult references, and Disney, this time around, wanted references that children would understand. In 1994, Disney released the animated series for Aladdin. There's not much to say here. It wasn't very good. The animation was poor quality. The stories were kind of boring. The only thing I could really say to give it any credibility is that Scott Weiner and Linda Larkin returned to their roles after being featured in all three of the previous films. A big problem at this point is Jasmine is reduced from a pretty strong female lead to more of a nagging spouse where she's always getting mad because Aladdin's getting in trouble all the time.
Goodbye, Aladdin.
Hello, Rosenrat!
Told you.
I always get my man.
Also in 1994, Marvel Comics got the license to release an Aladdin comic book. This series was also not very good, being only 11 issues, only lasting for about a year before it was cancelled. It was written by Lee Nordling and drawn by David Regard. The stories that were featured were uninteresting and the art was pretty bland as well. I'm sure they were restricted by Disney, but still I didn't find these comics enjoyable at all. In 1993, we saw the release of two Aladdin games, one for the Super Nintendo by Capcom, the other for the Sega Genesis by Virgin Games. During my research, there was a little bit of confusion as I found that there was an NES, Game Boy, and Game Boy Advance version of the Aladdin games. The NES and the Game Boy were a port of the Virgin Sega game, and the Game Boy Advance was a port of the Super Nintendo Capcom game. Both of these games are 16-bit 2D platformers, and while they're pretty similar, I found some major differences. The graphics are very alike. However, I found the colors on the Sega game to be much more vibrant. As far as gameplay, in the Sega version, you're running around with a sword fighting with all the bad guys. In the Super Nintendo version, you're doing parkour all over the screen, fighting bad guys by bouncing off of them and making your way through the level. Both games had good level designs, however, I feel the Sega version has slightly better designs. You have backgrounds and foregrounds that are much more in-depth, and like I said before, the colors are vibrant, really bringing the game to life. A major difference I found is in the game soundtrack. Where the Sega game features a lot of songs you'll recognize, in the Super Nintendo game, there's only 2 levels that have songs from the movie. They both feature a level based on escaping the Cave of Wonders. Both games do this pretty well, though I believe the Sega one is much more intense and therefore better. They also both feature a level on meeting the genie. The Sega version has you in the Cave of Wonders, basically playing through A Friend Like Me. However, on the Sega version, you're running across clouds, jumping from cloud to cloud. I don't really know what happened here, but it was weird, and I don't know. At this point, I'm leaning heavily towards preferring the Sega version. However, At that point, we get to the final boss fight with Jafar. Sega version is very lackluster. He's kind of just pushing you and pulling you with his staff, and then he kind of just turns into the Cobra, and nothing really happens. It's very easy and not at all impressive. However, in the Super Nintendo version, you fight Jafar for a bit, and then he turns into the giant Cobra, and it takes up the whole screen. This is the one part of the Super Nintendo game that I think they did very well. If you could put this boss fight into the end of the Sega game, that's the perfect Aladdin game right there. However, they didn't. There was quite a debate in the 90s over these two games of which one was better. I think I'd have to go with the Sega version. While that boss fight is lackluster at the end, overall I think the game does very well in getting you to wanting to come back and play it again and again. Whereas Super Nintendo, it just has that final boss fight. Later on, Disney Interactive came out with their first and only Aladdin game for the PlayStation 1 called Nasira's Revenge. This game saw Nasira, Jafar's sister, trying to bring Jafar back from the dead. This was a 3D platformer. The graphics were terrible even by PlayStation 1 standards, and the voice acting was not good. There was a really bad fighting system, easy puzzle solving. To call these puzzles, I think that would be a slap in the face of puzzles. The story also wasn't good. Nasira's trying to bring back her dead brother. Jasmine gets kidnapped for some reason, and it's just overall not very interesting. However, the music in the game was pretty good. It wasn't anything you'd recognize, but it was probably the best part of the whole game. There were 2 levels on the game that I actually enjoyed, and they were both magic carpet rides. In the first, you're traversing through the castle, trying not to hit any pillars or any obstacles in the way. Pretty fun and pretty intense. And then you get to the final boss fight, where you're fighting Jafar's giant spinning head, which is hurling fireballs at you. You're just running around in a circle trying to avoid these fireballs, and if you notice, Jafar's face doesn't change at all. He's the same stoic look throughout. In 2019, Disney released a live-action version of their film, starring Mena Massoud, Naomi Scott, and Will Smith. It was directed by Guy Ritchie. With Guy Ritchie directing this film, I actually had some confidence in it, as he does chase scenes very well, and Aladdin is full of chase scenes. Before this movie came out, there was a lot of concern over Will Smith playing the genie.
You're kidding, right?
Of course, you can't fill the shoes of Robin Williams, but if you think about very animated actors, you think of people like Will Smith and Jim Carrey. As long as you stay within that realm, I think you'd be okay. After seeing the film, I actually had no problem with Will Smith as the genie. In fact, I thought it was one of the highlights. I had a problem with pretty much everyone else. I thought the guy who played Aladdin was really bland, and Naomi Scott was pretty good, but not like she committed to the role. And the guy who played Jafar, I couldn't get into it. He wasn't menacing enough. It wasn't creepy enough. He needed those things to really be a vile, evil character. And there was concern over how the genie looked. I think once you saw his human form versus his genie form, it was more understandable. I felt that the story was pretty much the same, maybe a little bit toned down, but I feel like the songs were definitely toned down. There wasn't any power behind anybody singing until Naomi Scott's Speechless. There you finally saw some power behind some vocal cords. When you have songs like A Friend Like Me and I Will Show You the World, leading up to those songs, I ended up disappointed with how they sung them. It couldn't get into that moment. It just took me right out of the movie. Overall, I thought this movie was okay, but it could have been a lot better without putting too much more into it. So if this video has interested you in going back or for the first time checking out Disney's Aladdin, I recommend the original movie, King of Thieves, and the Sega Aladdin game. Here are the things you should probably avoid: Return of Jafar, the Super Nintendo Aladdin game, Nasira's Revenge for PlayStation, the animated series, the Marvel Comics series, and maybe the 2019 live-action film. You can find all the films on Disney Plus if you want to check them out. Everything else is a little harder to come by. You might want to check your local retailers or online. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe below. I'm Kyle, and this has been Fandomology.